President Biden's secret plan for the debate against Donald Trump has just leaked, and it has a lot to do with the already concluded trial in New York with Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. Bragg, he argues that despite the trial being over, he's pushing that the gag order on Donald Trump be extended. This means that the former president will be limited in what he can say. Meanwhile, President Biden, he can make any assessment, any assertion, pretty much say anything that he wants against Donald Trump. And so while this is the idea that many are taking from Bragg's actions, he says this is not the truth. So DA Alvin Bragg argues that they have received threats and harassments after the guilty verdict in New York. And this is why Donald Trump should be silenced until he says otherwise. Now, what do y'all think about that? Is it Donald Trump's fault that they came to this conclusion, to this verdict, and people are not happy? Now, some analysts are questioning Alvin Bragg over this particular decision because what this means is that he can keep Donald Trump gagged for pretty much as long as he wants. So now, do any of you guys believe that this is completely against the First Amendment? Certainly seems like it, doesn't it? Because supporters of the former president, they believe that he should be able to speak his mind. Do you agree with that idea? Because Donald Trump's legal team is saying that this is not constitutional and that Donald Trump should be allowed to speak without any kind of fear of repercussion. So here's former Assistant U.S. Attorney Andy McCarthy weighing in on the subject. Take a listen.
A gag order of the kind that the judge imposed, which I thought was constitutionally infirm, even under the circumstances of the trial, is imposed in order to administer the trial. Once the trial's over and the jury's dismissed and everyone's dismissed, there's no reason to have a gag order in place. If Alvin Bragg thinks that Trump is threatening or inciting people, he's perfectly free to indict him for that. If he had the evidence, he would do that. But the other thing that's peculiar here is Trump was convicted on 34 counts because of the way that Bragg parsed one transaction in order to turn it into 34 felonies. As a result, the judge has somewhere between 20 and 136 or so years of exposure to sentence Trump to, depending on how you read the New York sentencing laws. Why does he need a gag order? He's got something hanging over Trump like nobody's business. He can impose sentence on July 11th and take into account anything, including if he thinks Trump engages in threatening behavior. So what's the point of a gag order now?
Interesting question, or interesting point. You raised in my mind when you were speaking. It seems that really is the main purpose of the gag order, at least in this case, right, is to have some kind of leverage over the defendant, the former president. The court insists all along that it has really been about the safety of the jurists, the safety of the jurors sitting there. Is that a reason to keep that in place now? Or even that sort of...
It's really not, because the jury's not sitting any longer. And what's effectively happening is Bragg is treating Trump as if he's convicted him of either threatening participants, obstructing justice, inciting violence, when he hasn't got proof of that. If he's got proof of that, he should indict Trump for that. But in the meantime, Judge Merchan couldn't possibly have more leverage over Trump than he has just by virtue of the fact that he's going to sentence him on what he's been convicted for.
So guys, this really opens up a very important question. Why is Donald Trump being treated as if he doesn't have any rights inside the United States? I mean, this is what many supporters are asking right now, because people like DA Alvin Bragg, Letitia James, Fani Willis, even look at Jack Smith. They're all treating Trump as if he doesn't have any rights, as if he's not a U.S. citizen, as if Donald Trump is illegal. Now, the same could be said for some of the other judges who are overseeing the former president's cases. And if you ask these people if Trump should be given the freedom to speak, they'll all say no, which kind of reminds me of what law professor and attorney Alan Dershowitz had said recently. He says that the people have the right to hear what Donald Trump has to say. He even said that the people should file lawsuits against New York because they're depriving us of the right to hear what a presidential candidate has to say. This really goes with what I said at the beginning of all of this, that this is the plan from the Biden campaign. This is why they even kind of took up the debate challenge from Trump, right? Because President Biden Biden will be allowed to call Trump a convicted felon and all these different names. Meanwhile, Trump won't be able to defend himself because he would be restricted by a gag order. It's kind of like, can you imagine getting into a ring with Mike Tyson and then one of your arms is tied behind your back, especially if it's like your dominant arm? That's pretty much what they're trying to do. Dershowitz claims that this gag order is trampling on our rights as listeners as well. I mean, so our rights as individuals, as Americans, to hear a presidential candidate are being trampled on. Basically, this particular attorney is citing that Donald Trump would be fighting Biden with one hand behind his back if he's told to not say anything about the case in New York. A case where many legal analysts, legal experts, they found it distasteful that Judge Juan Merchan's daughter, was making millions of dollars while attacking Donald Trump. His wife was also said to be working with AG Letitia James. But if this gag order is extended, then the former president can't state these facts against Biden. Now, the expectation is that an appeal is imminent, but as we can see, time is quickly running out. And the same can be said for Judge Arthur Engoron, as Alina Habba is pushing to get him removed from Donald Trump's civil fraud case. So this all stems from something that Judge Engoron supposedly forgot to do. Donald Trump's team is calling out the judge's alleged appearance of impropriety following claims that he received unsolicited advice from New York real estate attorney Adam Liebman Bailey. Now, he allegedly heard this out while the trial was still ongoing. He's not allowed to do this kind of thing, guys. So as you guys might remember, Judge Engoron seemingly worked hand in hand with Attorney General Letitia James in order to fine Donald Trump for this ridiculous civil fraud. The amount came out to what, like $500 million? $454 million was the big number we kept hearing. It's closer to $500 million now, with Attorney General Letitia James even threatening to steal some of the former president's businesses and real estate assets away. So now Bailey admitted that he talked to the judge just weeks before the trial started and told him that he wants Engoron to get things right. See the air quotes? Yeah. So even though he says that he and Judge Engoron didn't even mention the name Donald Trump, it's very clear that this is what they were discussing. Now, to give you guys an idea of, to who this attorney is, he's a guy that sued Donald Trump more than 6 times. I mean, this should pretty much tell you right out the gate, right? Which kind of makes you wonder what he wanted Judge Engoron to get right. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is clearly not allowed. And it's also something that Engoron should have made clear to both the defense and the prosecution team handling this case. He should have recused himself right out the gate because of this. Now, in contrast, Judge Juan Merchan on his end, he quickly notified everybody involved when a Facebook post alleged that one of the jurors in the hush money trial was compromised. So that post was quickly deleted, but it talked about guilty verdict a day before it was even announced. So how do you know Donald Trump was going to be guilty a day before it was announced? And the individual who posted on the New York the New York Unified Court System's public Facebook account was supposedly a cousin of one of the jurors. So how do you think the cousin of one of the jurors knew what the verdict was going to be before the verdict was announced? You know what I'm saying, guys? And so that's the norm that Engoron forgot. Now, you would think that he would have paid attention since Juan Merchan is in the same state of New York as Judge Arthur Engoron. Oh, well. But he was supposed to do what Merchan did, and that was to notify the parties involved about this conversation. And I think Merchan saw what happened when Engoron didn't say anything. So he's like, hey, let me not get burned just like Judge Arthur Engoron did. Let me send this email out and make everybody aware. And so this is how we became aware. This has Alina Habba going out and basically saying, hey, if this conversation had influenced the verdict, then it means that they have to have grounds to vacate the decision for a reversal. Sounds like a mistrial to me, if you ask me. That would then be basically another massive, huge win for Donald Trump, further cementing his message that the system is in fact working against him. And, that these cases and these trials have been set in place to interfere with the 2024 presidential election, which kind of reminds me of a previous video I did where we covered an MSNBC report actually talking about Donald Trump winning the Jack Smith case. Now, I know it sounds crazy, but they reported it on national television. So make sure you guys check that one out right after this one, because it really shows that even left-leaning media outlets, they're facing the reality of of another Trump term in the White House. And it's very likely. Now, as always, appreciate y'all watching. Thanks so much for hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. And I'm going to see you guys on the next one. Be safe.